It's the Security Weekly News, and it's episode 289. I'm Doug White, and it's Friday, the 14th of April, 2023. We've got MSMQ, CLFS, Fortinet, Spectre Redux, Google Pay, BingBots, and more on this episode of the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
Did you know that Active Directory is exploited in 9 out of 10 cyber attacks? With access to Active Directory, attackers can gain control of your network. To keep attackers out, you need to find and fix Active Directory security gaps. Meet Purple Knight, a free security assessment tool that scans your environment for hundreds of vulnerabilities and helps you fix the problems. Ready to reduce your Active Directory attack surface? Download Purple Knight, the #1 Active Directory security vulnerability assessment tool. Visit securityweekly.com/Semperis, SEMPERIS, for more information.
Hi folks, I'm Adrian Sanabria, the host of Enterprise Security Weekly. Every week, we interview the most interesting folks we can find talking about the most pressing cybersecurity issues and challenges facing the enterprise today. Myself and my co-hosts have each been in the industry for decades, long enough to see the patterns in the industry and explore where trends are going. In addition to enterprise challenges, we also follow the vendor space, the most interesting security startups emerging, technology and product trends, all of the most interesting funding and acquisition announcements. Finally, we love to discuss the latest trends in tech and how they'll impact cybersecurity. If you're wondering how the latest in AI, quantum computing, cloud, and DevOps is going to impact security a few years down the road, you should follow the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast.
All right, it's the Security Weekly News. It only seems like summer here. Don't worry, New England. Winter is coming. This is just that misleading thing. Well, the FBI detained a 21-year-old member of the Air National Guard yesterday. Jake Teixeira of Massachusetts was arrested at home for disclosing a large number of classified documents on a Discord channel called Thug Shaker Central. The private group was dedicated to guns, religion, and military. So, great combination of things there. Teixeira, who went by the name OG, you always know when somebody goes by the name OG, they're going to be wonderful, who, especially when they're 21 years old, who went by the name OG in the group, worked for the Air Guard at the Joint Base Cape Cod, and was apparently using the documents to show the members important facts as he saw them that he could provide and did to his members about top secret military intel. And it was indeed top secret military intel if you've looked at any of the documents. So he was pulling down highly sensitive and secret stuff from the Air Force, I guess, and basically showing and interpreting and annotating all this stuff for the members of his little group. Now, some of the members of his little group may have been Russian, Ukrainian. Some people said, oh, that person who says they're a Russian isn't really a Russian and all this other stuff. But regardless, there was a folder on the site called Bear versus Pig, apparently contained top secret documents related to the Ukrainian conflict that's going on. And then despite him having sworn all the members to secrecy, like kids playing in a treehouse, and like that little bastard Terry went and told Melinda I liked her sister. No, somebody ran their mouth, and they reposted the documents to, wait for it, 4chan. Always a source of quality, sensitive information. And pretty soon, the documents were on Russian telegraph channels, Twitter feeds, pretty much everywhere. And, of course, then they're on the Washington Post and the New York Times and, the San Jose Evening News. Well, at the end of the day, each one of those documents gets you 10 years in Fort Leavenworth prison. So I guess you really will be the OG when you get out of there. I mean, look, this is not cool, okay? I get the whole hacking mentality, and I don't even think this involved that. I think this was the I'm 21 years old and I want people to think I'm cool kind of mentality. But, I mean, releasing military secrets is a really good way to get military people hurt. Because when you put this stuff out there, you may be endangering people's lives. And so not cool. I mean, this guy's tribe says he was all about the patriotism and all about the military, but then he went out and put everybody in harm's way trying to show how cool he is to a bunch of teenagers on Discord. Not that I mean, that's not even the story. You should expect that. He's a 21-year-old guy. He's trying to impress a bunch of teenage boys. Ooh. But, you know, he actually had access to things that I have no idea why on earth he had access to. And, I mean, I had a top secret clearance. I know what goes into that. I know how they try to control that. This was outrageous. It is an interesting story that's probably going to continue to develop as they start asking why did he have access to these things and who granted it. But, you know, I mean, that's the way it goes. But it does really, really underscore that we need to start reviewing classified document controls, or this is just going to keep happening. There's a lot of 21-year-old boys out there, and if you give them access to top secret stuff, well, guess what you get? A critical vulnerability in Windows message queuing, or MSMQ, was patched in the April Patch Tuesday event. Now, MSMQ is on every single Windows operating system. I mean, literally. It's an optional component, so it's not necessarily active on your system, but it is there. So if you've turned it on, what it does is it provides apps with network stack capabilities that have guaranteed messaging delivery. So this is just an improved API that lets apps use the network stack more effectively. It's usually enabled using PowerShell or by the install process, but you can enable it in a control panel as well. The problem is that it allows an unauthenticated attacker, always a bad sign, to gain remote code execution, an even worse sign. And basically, they can do this with a malicious MSMQ packet. So during the communications process, apparently, it is an easy attack. So it was rated as, you know, low complexity, which means it's not hard to put together. So it doesn't require the user to approve it. So if that machine is running MSMQ, they send it a packet, then poof, they can execute remote code. And, you know, as they say in business, that'd be bad, okay? But affected are pretty much all versions of Windows, is what the article said. So probably anything that's still running. I mean, I don't know if I should try to patch Lou's old 3.1 Windows box, but the article says all versions. You know, that old 3.1 machine is running DOS 5.0 with Windows 3.1, and we built it so he could run this Fortran compiler that would no longer work on anything else. But anyway, Microsoft tagged the exploit as, quote, exploitation more likely, and said that it was aware of past exploitation of this type of vulnerability. FortiGuard Lab and Checkpoint are credited with finding the problem in the first place. According to this article, there are currently about 360,000 servers, and of course, all of them have MSMQ installed, but it's not necessarily active. So if you have a Windows server, this is probably something worth checking. Gray Noise said that there are currently 10 different IPs that are actively scanning for exposed servers. Microsoft advised if you can't patch this for some reason with this April Patch Tuesday patch, you should disable the MSMQ service. So it's definitely something you're going to want to check right now. You can scan for port 1801 TCP, which is where it runs, to see if the message queuing service is running. Now, obviously, to me anyway, the first step in all this would be blocking 1801 TCP at your border. So don't even let anybody come in on that port. I went and did that this morning, even though I already had it blocked, implicitly. I went and blocked it explicitly, just like I do other stuff that Microsoft warns about. So check that out. But they did patch it on Patch Tuesday. Another Microsoft zero day that was patched in this month's Patch Tuesday, which addressed around, and this recent patch had more than 100 vulnerabilities in it. This one is a privilege escalation flaw in Windows Common Log File System, or CLFS. Microsoft said that this vulnerability has already been exploited in the wild, but they did not provide any details about it. Kaspersky, Mandiant, and DB App Security, which is a Chinese company, have all been credited for reporting this zero day. So CLFS is a log file subsystem, which is a general purpose logging service that can be used in user or kernel mode. And again, some of those, I see kernel mode, I'm going, oh. But Kaspersky said that a cyber criminal gang, which conducts ransomware operations, has been exploiting this vulnerability and then delivering Nokayawa ransomware to the victims. Kaspersky said that dozens of vulnerabilities in the CLFS system have been found in the last 5 years, and that at least 3 of them have been exploited in the wild. So again, Patch Tuesday will take care of this. You definitely should be patching. If you can't patch, you may want to research that one a little bit more. They didn't have a lot of details about it, and I know I put it on my little sheet of things I need to look up this afternoon and make sure that if I have any servers that are exposed, I can patch that. I just like to block stuff like that in general in my firewall. Speaking of Microsoft still, so it's been Microsoft Day, Windows 11 is getting a new privacy setting which will allow applications to detect when you are interacting with the device. I think it's through the sensors on the device, which is scary in and of itself. The change is now in beta preview build, a beta preview build, which was released today. So if you want to experiment with this, you can get it right now. And the article has the number of the build and the K update that you can install so that you can actually have this on your system. The setting is called presence sensing, and it basically allows apps to use the API to determine if you are active or inactive, which sounds scary. So I think what it means from reading, I read a couple things about it. What it means is that it can tell if you're actually sitting at the device, you're holding your phone, or you're sitting in front of it, or it's laying on the floor of a public restroom in Italy next to your passed out form. Not that happened, but I think kind of a Hitchcock crane shot that's sort of slowly pulling back above in a spiral like Psycho, but then reveals you aren't actually dead, but you're just passed out with your trousers around your ankle. So more like Train Spotting. Not that I would know or ever saw that actually happen. But anyway, you can block apps from accessing the Presence Center. So I guess that's good. Bad? I'm still not sure about this thing. I want to wait until some people start fiddling with it before I make a decision about it. But they're implying that it's bad. So it says, quote, you can have more control over your privacy and prevent apps from collecting and using your data with your consent. They went on and said that this can allow for automatic locking if you aren't using the device. So there seems to be some positive features, but there's some scary stuff here too, that if apps can detect whether you're there or not, they could, I guess, do stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I can think of a lot of different scenarios. Microsoft said on their end, of course, there was no data collection done and all the processing for this is local on your device. So they're not trying to detect if you're using your phone. But if you have installed it, you do have to install it at this point. It's a beta. It's under the privacy. It's on the settings menu under privacy and security. So you can enable it on your test beds and start, fiddling around with seeing what you can do with it. I don't know. It sounds kind of like a bag of broken glass and bacon. You want the bacon, but your mouth just won't stop bleeding. Yeah, I don't know. I'll wait till there's more information. Fortinet released multiple security updates this week, including a critical vulnerability in FortiPresence. The 2022 vulnerability had a CVSS score of 9.3 and can be exploited by our favorite remote unauthenticated attackers using home-rolled authentication requests. The bug affects FortiPresence version 1.0, 1.1, and 1.2. So if you are using version 2.0 of FortiPresence, you're not subject to it. But if you have one of those older versions, you need to patch. Fortinet also released an advisory detailing a vulnerability in the Linux kernel version used for FortiAuthenticator, FortiProxy, and FortiSIM, which can allow someone with low privileges to rewrite a page cache and then escalate privileges. That particular one was called Dirty Pipe, and if you remember, we talked about that back in 2022. It was an old one, but it's still there. So anyway, if you use Fortinet products, you might want to check out their updates and their advisories about Dirty Pipe as well, that they just released an update to in April, if you haven't already, or patch. And remember Spectre? Not the James Bond Spectre, but the far more terrifying CPU vulnerability that was back before the pandemic and was a whole series of news stories and events called Spectre and Meltdown. Yeah, you might want to go read back up on that if you've forgotten. I mean, back in January of 2018, this was a big deal. I was asking interview candidates for a CISO job, what they thought about it, and some of them are going, "What is it?" And I'm like, "Oh, you'd be a great CISO." But together, they allowed for the possible extraction of privileged memory information from the CPU by predictive. It's a predictive algorithm that tries to guess and put stuff in the cache that you're going to need. But if you could force stuff in there you didn't want, or extract things from there that you did want, well, that could be really bad, and it could be executed by compiled code like in C. They said it might even be possible by JavaScript. So it was a big deal, and it involved all sorts of read-ahead operations that could be abused and so forth. It's quite interesting. If you haven't read up on it in a while, I went back and was reading some stuff about it this morning. I was like, wow, this was a very interesting thing. It affected Intel, AMD, ARM, IBM. It affected everything, so it was terrifying. But it's still out there, right? Because they really couldn't fix this without basically selling you a new processor. Microsoft did claim they blocked it somehow, by preventing that kind of thing from happening. I don't remember all the grim details. But in this story, Eduardo Villanova from Google disclosed a new Spectre-related flaw that's in the 6.2 version of the Linux kernel. It was only medium severity, but still, the word kernel. You just never want to hear CPU or kernel in a security briefing, ever. At least I don't. Maybe you like it, but I don't. The report said that cloud service providers are the most likely affected by this, and that it was patched on the 27th of February, 2023. The quote says, quote, "The kernel failed to protect applications that attempted to protect against Spectre version 2, leaving them open to attack from other processes running on the same physical core in another hyperthread." I went, wow, that's pretty cool. As a programmer, he's like, that sounds really, really cool. Patch, please, patch. Serge Christians, I think, because there's double A's, and if it's Dutch, the A's are long. Serge Christians, the director of Information Systems Audit and Control Association, was speaking at the Singapore Smart Cybersecurity Summit this week. I guess my invitation got lost in the mail, right? I'm very sad. Singapore is awesome. Well, an interesting point was made. Christians was a pilot, like a commercial pilot, before becoming a CISO, and said that up until 1990, the number of fatal commercial jet accidents was growing alongside the growing number of commercial flights. But around 2000, despite the fact that the number of commercial flights was continuing to climb annually, the number of fatal accidents started to decline. And I had a really good joke there, but it was just too dark. I took it out. I was like, I just don't want to go down those roads again. But Christians argues that one of the big changes that may have, and this is an op-ed piece that I posted, but they may have impacted it, was a change in the culture with pilots. And the concept that they tried to change was that sometimes mistakes happen, which you never want to hear with surgeons and pilots, but it's the truth. Nobody's perfect. And I'm a pilot. I have a pilot's license. I can't fly commercial jets, but I can fly little Cessnas and, Piper Cubs and things. But, basically, sometimes people screw up. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't even necessarily mean they're negligent. It just means sometimes humans make mistakes. And accepting that the people made them, and that we should learn from those mistakes, which is what they do in like surgery and all that kind of stuff. When somebody has a fatality, they have a panel and they look at it and they try to figure out what can we do differently next time. And when the airline started pushing that, instead of punishing pilots for reporting mistakes, they actually there's no evidence here that that's exactly the case, but maybe if the mistakes are not being punished, maybe people would report them more and we could all learn from that mistake to not do that. If it's negligence, that's one thing, but if it's just a mistake. So I guess the reason I was reading this was they talked about how this should be also the case in cybersecurity, and we were talking about that on the news on Pulse Security Weekly last Wednesday. And we do need to establish communications and the ability to treat mistakes as learning experiences and encouraging employees to come forward and say, I gave a 21-year-old kid, classified access to top secret files. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe that was negligence. I'm not sure, but it was definitely a mistake. And how do we fix that in the future? And so sharing that information and so forth. And I just think that's going to improve security a lot. And that was the whole point of this story. It's really scary to have to wake up the vice president at 3 a.m. and say, we're down. I've done it and it sucks. But that's a cultural shift that is hard to make. But I do think we need to make it. So maybe read this and see what you think. I guess I should have known about this sooner. A bug in Google Pay apparently was giving away cash. Random Google Pay users got between $12 and $1,000, and according to this report, it was an error on the part of Google Pay, and anyone who spent the funds or transferred them to a bank account will get to keep the money. But if the balance was still in your Google Pay app, they're taking it back. Wow, punish honesty much? If you stole the money laughing, well, good for you. But if you waited and left it in the app to see if it was not supposed to be there, well, thanks for returning it. Nasty. I was like, gee, I didn't get any, but Google has declined to explain how this happened. Nobody's really sure what went on, or if they were testing something and it went wrong, or it was some kind of, nobody knows yet, but hopefully we'll find out at some point. Well, when his career as a juggler didn't take off, he became a roadie for Motorhead and was the official handler of Lemmy's sideburns for 17 tours. Please welcome Aaran Leyland.
Hey, Doug, I'm come to join in Microsoft Day, I think.
Yay.
Yay, Microsoft, doing the good work.
You guys got to keep kicking them while they're down.
No, it's like one of the biggest companies in the world, and they're still doing so much wrong. But
yeah.
They're never going to give us a job, are they?
No, they're not. Although, Bill, call me. I mean,
Yeah. I'm willing to come help with all your problems if you really want.
Sure, or feed your dogs or whatever. I mean, it's just if the pay
Look after your sideburns.
Yeah, exactly. I could.
Okay, so joining in on Microsoft Day. If it seems like we talk about phishing lots, we definitely do for very good reason. And today's article, which is in the show notes, Doug's giving me the giggles. I don't know, anytime I hear about Lemmy, it makes me smile. Oh, God bless. Okay, so Microsoft phishing attack targets accounts as tax day approaches. Microsoft is warning of a phishing campaign targeting accounting firms and tax preparers with remote access malware allowing initial access to corporate networks. So from the source AAG, they state that phishing is the most common form of cybercrime. An estimated ridiculous number of 3.6 or 3.4 billion phishing emails are sent every day, with more than half of those affected by cybercrime falling victim to phishing. For businesses, this number is even higher, and they've looked at the UK here, and apparently 83% of UK businesses that suffered a cyber attack in 2022 said they were a victim of phishing. Okay, so with USA reaching the end of its annual tax season, accountants are scrambling to gather clients' tax documents. And be very afraid, to complete and file their tax returns. Due to this, it makes an ideal time for threat actors to target tax preparers, hoping that they will mistakenly open malicious files that they would generally be more careful with when less busy. Microsoft warns in a new report, with US tax day approaching, Microsoft has observed phishing attacks targeting accounting and tax return preparation firms to deliver the REMCOS remote access Trojan and compromise target networks beginning in February of this year. So the phishing campaign starts with emails that pretends to be clients sending necessary documents to complete their return. So it's got languages like the following to try and soften the approach of the email receiver. I apologize not responding sooner. Our individual tax returns should be simple and not require much of your time. I believe you would require a copy of our most recent year's documents, such as W-2s, 1099s, mortgages, interest, donations, medical investments, HSAs, and so on, which I have uploaded below. That really looks like something that's been written by ChatGPT, but who knows? It's not been written by a Nigerian prince, that's for sure. So the language here is showing that you should expect there to be attachments, hoping that you will not question them. So the phishing emails then contain links that utilize click tracking services to evade detection by security software and ultimately lead to a file hosting site that downloads a zip archive. So this is something which I don't often hear about. So I've included an explanation on how utilizing click tracking services works. Piggying on a domain is appealing to threat actors, not only because it increases the odds of making it past spam filters, but also for ease of creation. By editing an existing URL, the burden of setting up their own redirect is removed, and they are able to take advantage of infrastructure already in place to launch their campaign. URL tracking systems use parameters to pass through various pieces of information. For managing advertising campaigns, one of these parameters is typically the final URL that the ad service should redirect users to after they have clicked on the tracking link. For Google Ads, this is the AD URL parameter, and by replacing the AD URL value with a phishing link, threat actors can easily subvert a legitimate Google Ads tracking URL and use it in attacks. So, on the discussed attack, the zip archive contains numerous files pretending to be PDF files for various tax forms, but they are actually Windows shortcuts. I myself would recommend that compressed files are blocked at the firewall, and legitimate compressed files have the file type changed for something that is allowed through the firewall, and then users change it back to the correct file type after they have confirmed that the email is real and expect it. At least do that if it suits as part of your defense in depth strategy. So when double-clicked, these Windows shortcuts will execute PowerShell to download a heavily obfuscated, that's easy for you to say, VBS file from a remote host, which is saved to C Windows tasks file, and execute it. At the same time, the VBS script will download a decoy PDF file and open it in Microsoft Edge to avoid arousing suspicion by the targeted person. So as we see here, there's something happening in the background and there's something happening in the foreground. And they're hoping that you only see what's happening in the foreground and then move quickly on after they pwn you. So Microsoft says that these VBS files will download and execute GU loader malware, which in turn installs the REMCOS remote access Trojan. So REMCOS is a remote access Trojan that threat actors commonly use in phishing campaigns to gain initial access to corporate networks. Then using this access, the threat actors can spread further through the network, stealing data and deploying other malware on the device. Microsoft says that while phishing campaigns currently commonly use tax-related themes, this campaign is unusual as it only targets tax preparation firms and individuals. So while social engineering lures like this are common around tax day and other big topic current events, these campaigns are specific and targeted in a way that's uncommon. Expect more of this, I would expect. The targets for this threat are exclusively organizations that deal with tax preparation, financial services, CPA, and accounting firms, and professional service firms dealing in bookkeeping and tax. As accountants hold highly sensitive data for individuals and corporations, a data breach of this type of organization could significantly harm a large group of people. As the initial loaders for the malware in this campaign are malicious files impersonating PDF files, we always recommend that users enable the display of file extensions in the window so they can identify suspicious files. Although unfortunately in this case, Windows shortcuts are a special file type that uses the INK file extension, but does not show the file extension when displayed in File Explorer. Obviously, these people have a bit of a clue what they're doing. The behavior makes detecting that file is a shortcut in disguise more difficult. However, listing files in File Explorer in details mode will show you that it is Windows shortcut, making it a bit easier to spot. So ultimately, no one should click on links and emails or open attachments unless they confirm they are sent from a legitimate contact. Otherwise, delete the email. So here are several telltale signs of a phishing scam and what we should do if you have concerns about the veracity of the email. The links or URLs provided in emails are not pointing to correct location or are pointing to a third-party site not affiliated with the sender of the email. Always something that I check first, actually. There's a request for personal information, such as social security numbers or bank or financial information. Official communications won't generally request personal information from you in this form, and hopefully our banks are going some way to actually teach us this. Items in the email address will be changed so that it's similar enough to a legitimate email address, but has added numbers or changed letters. To be honest, when I get these and I look at the email address, it's normally something along the lines of nonsense, and it's definitely not a sort of readable domain name. The message is unexpected and unsolicited. If you suddenly receive an email from an entity or a person you rarely deal with, consider it suspect. Look into it deeper. So the message or attachment asks you to enable macros, adjust security settings, or install applications. I guess everyday normal emails won't ask you to do this, unless maybe it's from IT or something. But even still, I would definitely question it. This is an old one, but still prevalent a little bit, but going away as also, but still good to look at. The message contains errors. Legitimate corporate messages are less likely to have typographic or grammatical errors or contain wrong information. Big one, the sender's address doesn't match the signature on the message itself. For example, an email is purported to be from Mary of Costa Corp, but the sender address is John at some unreadable domain.com with loads of figures and loads of characters, and just isn't something that looks normal. Another one, which on a lot of phishing emails that I receive, there's multiple recipients in the to field, and they appear to random addresses. Corporate emails normally won't do this. And then as well, what we could look at, the greeting of the message itself doesn't personally address you. Apart from messages that mistakenly address a person, greetings that misuse your name or pull your name, this is definitely a good one, that pull your name directly from your email address tend to be malicious. Also, we have a page that opens that is not a live page, but rather an image that is designed to look like the site you're familiar with. This is probably looking at being a little bit too late, but definitely report it to your information security people. Lots to think about, and it's getting harder as adversaries are getting better at crafting emails which do not arouse suspicion. If in doubt, don't open the email and contact the apparent sender by another means. Maybe by the telephone. Let's use the telephone. Okay, back to you in the studio, Dr. Doug.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. And yeah, those are pretty standard attacks and great advice. So just, it's tough. I mean, we all get those things constantly, and I get people sending them to me regularly saying, what do you think? Is this a scam or not? And I'm usually like, it's a scam before I even look at it. But then being
a scam than not.
No, my wife last night said, I got an SMS and I was like, it's a scam. And she was like, well, at least hear what it is. And it turned out it wasn't a scam, but I was like, first thing I said was, who's it from? And she said, it's from a bank. And I was like, it's a scam. And she's like, no. And it turned out it was some anti-fraud stuff. So it was, they're still using that. And, it didn't ask for any information or whatever. So, it was not a scam. But usually it's a scam. So, that's the way I think.
A big one going around the UK again and again and again, and we see about it a lot, is hi mom, hi dad, my phone's broke, I'm calling you from a friend's number. It's like and then please send me $100 so I can get a taxi type thing.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one. That's yeah. And when one of my relatives sends me that, I'm like, suck it. But
I'm gonna fly away on my aeroplane from you.
There you go. All right. And finally, the Washington Post was asking the Bing chatbot. That's a new addition to Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Bing. They've added AI-enabled chatbot to that. They were asking it questions to see if the answers were right. I mean, I wouldn't expect the answers from a chatbot to be any better than what's on the internet, because that's sort of what they're based on. So probably not so great. But they asked Bing 47 tough, that's their word, questions. And they didn't say what they were. Now, Bing includes citations for answers, so that to me is a huge improvement over the voice in the void saying the Earth may be flat. So I mean, it does have citations. It can be a little much for most people when they just want to know, something simple, and they get all these citations, and then you have to verify the citations and so forth, like you're doing a doctoral thesis or whatever. But anyway, they used 10 journalists to review the results, and they found that about 6 out of 10 questions, so I guess they mean 60%, but 60% of the answers were considered fine, their word. 3 in 10 were okay, or 30%, and 1 in 10 then, I guess, were inadequate or inaccurate. I mean, that actually sounds pretty good in general. I mean, if you walked up to random people on the street and said, "What's Babe Ruth's favorite cigar?" I mean, would you trust their answer? Or maybe check with another source or ask the drunk guy on the other side of you? Maybe. I mean, if you're doing research, don't just dive in there. I have to tell my students this all the time. Don't just take the first hit you get on Google, because remember, those are being paid for. So that first hit you get and then, cite it, you may end up in a pretty ugly place. But, hopefully you already know that. Or if you don't, let me interest you in some of Doc Harmon's magic hair growth formula. It's only $19.99, and if you order today, that's the news. Thanks, Aaron. We'll see you next week on the Security Weekly News.